Welcome into the Skinny Podcast. It's the weekly potpourri edition. I'm Richard Skinner, local12.com, digital sports columnist and editor. Along with Rick Broering, as always, it's presented by Blake, the attorney Maislin. Forgive my voice overcoming a bit of a chest cold. And so it'll be gravelly and coffee at times, but we will get through this podcast as we always do. Rick, we got a lot to get to. We're winding down in college basketball, but still a lot of interesting storylines. I'm just back from the Combine after a couple of whirlwind days there of talking to Duke Tobin at the podium, off the podium, Zach Taylor at the podium, off the podium, talking to a bunch of assistant coaches yesterday, and it is a whirlwind that has worn me out.
Yeah, the Combine cold, they call that, I believe.
Yes, I believe that's correct.
All right, so we're going to start with the Combine trip, and I've got a bunch of different things that I heard from the press conferences with Tobin and Taylor, but just your overall, what's the first thing you would say that you took away from that experience?
I think Duke saying that he thinks he can get the contracts that he thinks they can get the contracts done with Jamar T and Trey Hendrickson, and I thought that all along. The money is there. I think the want to is there, and as I mentioned, I think on a billion of the podcasts we've done, the ones I've done with Mike Petraglia, the key part for me with T, I mean, it's clear they know they're going to have to overpay Jamar, and he made it clear that we know he's going to be the highest paid non-quarterback in the NFL because he flat out said that. So they know that. And I'll get to a little subplot to that here in just a second. The T one, though, I go back to what is the line in the sand? What is the fair line in the sand? Our teams, as Duke pointed out, willing to pay T as a number one receiver. And that's been floated probably to the agent by now. Here's what we're willing to give you. But at what point do the Bengals have to say, no, that's just too rich for our blood? As I mentioned, I'm not going to blame them if this gets to a stratosphere where it doesn't make sense to do it. I will blame them if we find out that the best offer they gave was something low-ballish that wasn't even close to the ballpark of where it should have been. So I don't know where the twain shall meet. I do. The response from T. Higgins with his little silly emoji thing that he thinks the Bengals are lying. I don't know what to read into that other than I guess he doesn't feel like the negotiations are going very well. Talking to the two coordinators yesterday, Al Golden, I think he's still trying to get a lay of the land for what he's got personnel-wise. And honestly, he made a point of not knowing what they're going to get in the draft and free agency. I think is slowing him down a little bit to decide what he wants to do, all things schematically. But yeah, it's the big news was obviously Duke speaking about the three major contracts.
All right, well, let's dive into some of the things he said specifically about those guys. Let's go back to Jamar first, because he mentioned that Jamar is likely to become the highest paid non-quarterback in the league. But I think the interesting thing that he said was that Jamar changed his mind last summer. Basically, I assume that was at the beginning of training camp when it sounded like they were going to get something done. And then you have Jamar showing up late to practice that one day, strolling in street clothes and not practicing with the team, and then kind of doing a little holdout thing. What did you take from Jamar changed his mind last year? Were you surprised to hear that?
I'm going to guess, though, that he changed his mind because the money was they tried to squeeze maybe a little bit more out of it. That's my guess. I don't blame them. And that's the subplot I was talking about. I honestly think that for those fans that wanted this contract done last year and then made the comment of, oh, it's going to cost you more. Maybe it was always going to cost you more, and they weren't ready to pay that more last year, and I can't blame them. So they kicked the can down the road knowing they were going to pay more this year, right? So I know they drew a lot of blame for that, but they had the guy under contract for 2 more years, and if they were close to a deal and then Jamar maybe balked at it, or his camp, I shouldn't say Jamar, it's usually the agent that balked at it, and decided, hey, we can probably get a little bit more, let's go for a little bit more, and the Bengals then at that point said, no, we'll kick this to next year. I think they've known all along that they're going to have to pay premium dollar. And why pay premium dollar then when you're going to have to pay premium dollar now? It's a savings of X number of millions of dollars for a year. What you had to pay him last year on the fourth year of his rookie deal.
Right, and we've talked about that at length already. Tobin also emphasized his optimism about Higgins staying, but he left the door open for negotiations or other possibilities as well. And then you mentioned after he spoke, I guess T. Higgins put on social media a blue hat emoji, which if you're not up to date on the lingo, means cap. Cap is the term there, meaning what you're saying is BS or you are lying about what you're saying. So obviously the implication everyone took from that is that T. Higgins did not agree with the lines Duke Tobin was giving there to the media. What was your take on all of that?
Yeah, I mean, that seems to be the case, but I will say this. I don't think Duke is speaking without knowing where the front office stands in this, right? He's not
Right.
just going to come off the cuff not knowing, what the front office is doing from a negotiation standpoint. He's not really the negotiator. That's Katie Blackburn's job, but I don't think he's going to speak without knowing. And maybe not. Maybe he's been fed a line of bull from the front office above him of, hey, we're really close, blah blah blah, and maybe he got blindsided by that. I don't think that's the case. I really don't. I think T's probably fear at the moment is that a deal's not going to come before March the 4th, and they're going to place the franchise tag on him. And then, all that does is kind of keep the negotiation window open. It also leaves into play the possibility of if they don't come to terms, that T plays this year or has to play this year on the franchise tag again. And maybe that's where his frustration lies of wanting to get something done before March 4th and before the tag deadline comes.
Duke Tobin also mentioned that they don't want to just pay more money for the same roster. They're focused on improving the team while rewarding their stars. That seems pretty basic, pretty straightforward, but it's also, I would say, from a fan's perspective, it was nice to hear. It was just reassuring to hear because that's the thing that I keep getting worried about. It's like everyone's talking about, you've got to re-sign these three big guys. And I'm like, okay, that'd be nice. But your team wasn't good enough with those three guys last year. So I want to see this team get better. I guess it was just nice to hear him put that out there on the record.
Yeah, and I think I've said that before, that I thought they could play all three and then have enough cap savings to go do some things in free agency. And let's not forget, they can still free up some significant cap space by cutting Sam Hubbard. They can free up some cap space by cutting Jermaine Pratt, cutting Zach Moss. And if you go to the length of cutting Geno Stone, although talking to Al Golden yesterday, I think Al thinks he can get some things out of Geno Stone. So I don't see that cut coming, but you can still save another – 25 or so million dollars in cap savings by getting rid of some dead weight. And I think that they will have enough money left over. That's why I've thought all along they've had the money to do this. They have the money to do this. I think they seem willing to do this. And then at the same time, realizing we are going to have enough money left over to go fix the roster. And we all know the roster has to be fixed in several ways, especially on that defense.
Well, speaking of the defense, he talked about Al Golden, the new defensive coordinator. One of the things that stood out to me there was he mentioned that Al Golden will play the best players regardless of experience, meaning younger guys could get bigger roles. Did you feel like that was a little bit of a shot at Lou Anarumo, or at least a little bit of a signifying this is part of why we changed?
Yeah, I think so. And when we were talking to Al yesterday, he was asked a question of, last year at Notre Dame, you played a lot of freshmen and sophomores. Did you have to do anything different when they were in the game, or did you just run the defense? He said, no, we just ran the defense and they caught up. And so I think it is a guy who's willing to play young people. In this case, rookies or second-year guys. It is a guy who puts a premium on development. And, I think that is a shot at Lou. But I also get Lou's philosophy. He doesn't want to run young guys out there because he doesn't trust them yet. And that's not a wrong philosophy. This is just a different philosophy. And I'm okay with that. I was okay with the way Lou did it. I don't think his philosophy was wrong. If you don't trust a young guy to play, then you can't play him. And so in this case, I think Al is one of, it's not a matter of trust. I'm just going to run them out there and they're going to get better because we're going to make them get better. Okay, that's fine. Let's see it happen. Let's see it come to fruition.
Yeah, I can't imagine there's too much variation between schemes and the complexity of them and all that, but it does make you wonder a little bit if like Lou had a tendency to make his guys overthink on the field, and there was like too much to where guys were being slowed down if they were younger and they didn't fully understand the system, versus a coach who's maybe more like, we just want you to play fast. Don't overthink it. Just get out there and make plays. I have no idea if that's the case, but that was kind of where my head went when I heard them talking about that.
Yeah, no, I think that's a fair point. And again, Lou had a philosophy. I don't think it was a wrong one. I just don't think he had players, and unfortunately that bit him in the ass, and he paid the price. Obviously, it's water under the dam now. And listen, it's all flowers and roses right now for Al Golden coming off what he did at Notre Dame. Kind of a fresh approach, a fresh voice. Let's see what happens 4 to 5 weeks in this season if this defense is any better or not.
Yeah. The one other thing he said on the defense is that defensive line was a priority, which is obvious. But he did mention the need for a fast, flexible edge rusher who can consistently win matchups. I mean, I think every Bengals fan is like, yeah, that sounds great. But just the fact that they mentioned that specific player archetype, what did you read into that?
Yeah, no, it's clear they need an edge rusher. I mean, it would be nice if Miles Murphy was that guy, and maybe he is. But that's the unfortunate part, and that goes back to you just haven't drafted well, and it's biting you in the ass. I mean, Miles Murphy, Rick, you would agree with this. When you drafted him 2 years ago, it was to actually be a productive starter at a minimum by year 3, and he hasn't done anything in 2 years. And so Who's that on? Is that on the evaluators or is that on the coach? We're going to find out because now a new coach, a new position coach, and a new coordinator is charged with getting more out of Miles Murphy. But I don't think you can rely on just that. Yeah, you've got to go get somebody either through the draft or free agency or both to improve that position.
Yeah, and then just a couple other things that kind of stood out to me, although it's pretty much stuff we know. One, he mentioned that Joe Burrow's influence in roster decisions is a big deal, and that he's an important partner in shaping the team. Which we have talked a little bit about how much Joe was kind of talking about it and putting pressure on them with all his interviews the last month. So kind of interesting to hear Duke mention that they're okay with that and they consider Joe a partner. Also, the Bengals. He mentioned that the Bengals rank the players in terms of the draft by best available talent and not their needs, which I think we've heard him say before, but every year we have those conversations of like, oh, what do the Bengals need most? And it's a good reminder that, well, like they're going to be looking for the best available player when it's their turn to draft.
Yeah, they do, but there's also a little flexibility in there too. There always has been of, let's just say the priority is defensive line, and for whatever reason, let's just say the first 2 rounds it falls into where you get an edge in a defensive tackle. You get to the third round, if the next best player on the board is one of those position groups, and maybe there's a wide receiver or a corner or a safety 3 notches below, then yeah, maybe you move that guy up just because you've already taken care of a couple of needs and you're not reaching. You're just going a couple of spots at that point. So there is some flexibility in there too.
Sure, it's all within reason, but just from a starting standpoint, that's
Yeah.
kind of the overarching philosophy.
I thought the other interesting part to me was him mentioning because Burrow's even talked about this, and I've mentioned this on the podcast where Burrow's been a big part of this push for T and those guys, and understandably so. And I've said I thought it was because he understands he has to restructure his contract. And actually, Duke said he didn't think he had to restructure the contract. They thought they could fit it all in as it is. That took me by surprise a little bit.
Interesting. Any other final thoughts from those press conferences? We got a few other Bengals things here.
Yeah, no, I think I'm press conferenced out. I still have an Al Golden story to write. I still got a Dan Pitcher story to write. So I still got a lot of stuff from the combine to unpack.
We will.
Well, I'll give you the other one was the Jermaine Burton stuff. I thought he said it before, but the fact that he's talked about not giving up on him, that the ball's in his court, that, time's running short, all those things, kind of things he said at the Senior Bowl. But I think just reiterating that they still have a belief that Jermaine Burton can turn out to be something. But the bottom line is it's now up to Jermaine, and it's time's running short for him to get that stuff done.
Well, I'll go ahead and make that call for him. I've given up on Jermaine Burton. I'm all set. NFLPA report cards came out. This is something that has been interesting from year to year now. And it's become interesting, especially for the Bengals, because they were criticized so much for decades. They've made major improvements. Those improvements have been reflected in these report cards, but it's also shown us that there are still some ways that they are just stuck and can't seem to get out of their own way to help themselves out. They ranked 24th out of 32 teams in the overall report card analysis. Their strengths were the locker room, which they just redid, third best in the NFL, got an A+. The training staff, fourth best in the NFL, got an A-. Team travel, 10th best in the NFL, got an A-. And head coach Zach Taylor, 9th best in the NFL, got an A. Players appreciate his efficiency and his openness to feedback. So I think we talked about this last year where Zach is a player's coach, and the players seem to appreciate him for that, even if the fans don't always. But then we get into the weaknesses, Skinny.
Oh, boy.
Treatment of families.
F-. Have you ever got Rick? I never got an F in my day. I remember I sweated a chemistry course where I did wind up, I think, with a D+. I think it's the worst grade I ever got. I'll be honest, I was a pretty good AB student. I don't even know how you get an F-. That's incredible to me.
I get the sense you were one of those students who were probably naturally, like it was easy for you, but you didn't put a lot of effort in. So you got like B's, but you should have been a straight A student.
Yeah, the ones that usually got me were the science courses. I just had zero interest whatsoever in science. Just
you and me both, brother.
I didn't care, man. English came easy for me. Math up until calculus came easy for me. Geography and social studies, that came easy for me because it interested me. I had no interest in science, and it clearly reflected that.
So even worse than science is I went to Catholic school, so we had religion class, which is just science with made-up dates that aren't actually real that you're supposed to remember. And so one year I got a D- in religion in high school, and my mom was absolutely furious. She's like,
"Oh, I'm sure.
How could you possibly get a D- in religion? Like, what'd you do?" She asked the teacher. I turned in 3 out of 24 assignments during that semester.
So real quick, I have a recurring nightmare. So I took Spanish in high school too, and Spanish came easy for me, although I can't speak a word of it. My grandmother was Cuban, so I decided that was the other language I wanted to learn. And I took it in college, and it came easy because honestly, the teacher I had, the Spanish teacher I had at Dixie Heights High School, was really good. I mean, he was really thorough and tough and hard grader, all the things that pushed you and I thought pushed you in the right direction. So it was easy for me. Except I really kind of sloughed off the last elective Spanish I took, and I scuttled my way to a B because half the time I was either late with an assignment or I barely got in. I have a recurring nightmare to this day. It comes about once every 2 or 3 months of me not graduating college and me racing to the Spanish class to try to get my work in on time, and I didn't make it.
First of all, that's awesome. Second of all, shout out to all the teachers with like those funny things they do. For instance, that D I got in religion was a
Yep.
D minus because the teacher thought that was funnier than giving someone an F. Thought
Oh,
a D minus was just the most disrespectful grade you could give someone. So she
that's
never
awesome.
failed anyone.
No, the
Yeah.
most disrespectful grade you can get is an F minus. So continue.
I didn't even know F minus existed until this report card came out. Nice little Ask Skinny Anything interlude there for you guys. But back to the Bengals NFLPA report card. Skinny, the treatment of families thing, no family room or game day care. They're one of only 3 teams that don't offer daycare during games. They ranked last in family support. The players mentioned that it felt almost disrespectful the way their families are treated by the organization. Here's what I just cannot wrap my head around. And actually, I'll just go through the other two because it's in the same boat. Food and dining got an F, 32nd last in the NFL.
I don't
Food
know if
taste,
I could. I don't. To me, that sounds like a bunch of divas who want 5-star cuisine. Listen, we don't get to eat there other than draft weekend as a media group. But I got to tell you, the food is more than fine on draft. I think they do a fine job. They got a fresh salad bar. They got fresh vegetables. They got meat choices. They've got. I don't know what these guys want other than 5-star cuisine that's done to their little sweet palates. I think that one's ridiculous. The family one, I'll give you. The food and dining, I think it's ridiculous. It's a nice dining area, plenty of room. I know they were mad about not getting an extra meal some days a week, and they're not wrong in that regard. It's kind of lumped together where,
yeah.
like this past year, they opened up on their off day. They would serve them breakfast. Listen, they should serve them 3 meals a day for whatever days the facility is open or guys are coming to the facility. That part I get, but that has nothing to do with the food and the dining. That's ridiculous.
Well, yeah, the food taste, freshness, those were rated low as well. But I also wonder if that's more just they're pissed off because they do not get the meals that other places
Right.
get. So they're
Right.
more critical about the other aspects of the dining along with that. I can see that being the case. Then the nutritionist and dietitian, they got a C, but they're 32nd, dead last in the NFL. Team lacks a full-time dietitian.
But they
Players
like her. They seem
they
to like
like her. They want her to be full-time. She only works
Yeah.
a couple days a week. So, Skinny, here's my thing with all 3 of these situations. They're the easiest things on this list to fix. It costs you next to no I mean, really, for a couple $100,000 a year, I could solve all of these problems for the
Right.
Bengals. We're talking about $200,000 is all you really need to make all of this happen.
No, Rick, you're right. That again, the food taste to me, I think is just absurd. But bottom line is, I mean, it won't cost you much to have her be a full-time staff member. It won't cost you to add an extra meal a day here and there. I mean, there's plenty of food, and it's not going to go to waste. And then
I
the
know egg
family,
prices have gone up, but geez, you can
yeah.
figure it out.
Well, you figure it out. In the family area, to me, that's just how hard can that be to find a space to make a family area?
Not to mention, you can hire daycare workers that you need
Yes.
once or twice a week for probably under 50,000 for the year. I mean,
Yeah, I think it's primarily the complaint is mostly on game day. I mean, if you're the wife, I mean, you'd like to be able to watch the game, watch your husband play, as
right.
opposed to chasing around 7 kids or 5 kids or throw a bait, whatever. I don't think that's a big ask. I just don't. I'm with you on
And
that.
and how difficult is it? The family room for the players' families, like when it's freezing cold out and they're after the game finishes or during the game that they've got to be there every other week for, that there's not a spot for them to just go in, relax, wait for their husband to get changed, showered, and get back to them and warm up a little bit and linger and hang out with each other. That costs literally almost nothing to do. And there's got to be some room within that facility that you can turn into that. I just don't understand why that hasn't been solved.
Yeah, I know a couple of the team facilities that I've traveled to. Kansas City has a nice family area that you walk past. I can't remember if it's either going to the locker room, but I always see it, and it's a nice area. Um, and Pittsburgh has a really nice one too. And so again, it can be done. I just don't understand why it hasn't. Now, the one thing I will say is this report card has forced them to make some changes. It forced them to upgrade the locker room, and the locker room, to your point, got an A+. Now that you see the last couple of really blemishes on there, the two Fs and the C, which seems extraordinarily fixable by just making this woman full time. It's to the players' credit. It doesn't sound like they don't like her. They just don't like the fact that she's not as available as she should be, or they
Which
want
is
her
even
to be.
worse.
Yeah, that's even worse to me, right? I mean, they like the lady, and she apparently does a good job. They just want her to be there more, and I don't think that's a big ask. And it's not going to cost you a ton. I do think that these report cards have forced the change, and I think you'll see them figure out a way to upgrade this, just because it's like literally the last 2.5 blemishes on there that they've kind of done each year. It's been okay. Let's go ahead and do this. Okay, let's go. I don't know why it's that way. I mean, it's just their way. It's not right. But hopefully this has put pressure, I think, on teams to do their upgrades in ways. And I think in theory, you go, this doesn't sound fair. It's anonymous. I think it's extraordinarily fair, and I think it's put pressure on teams to do better.
Skinny, they spent millions last year to fix their plumbing issues and get
Right.
the exploiting toilets to work and the hot showers to be hot again and all this other stuff they did for the locker room, which is impressive stuff. And it is costly and it is hard to do. The stuff that's left now is the easy stuff on the list. It's just you being cheap and not caring at all. It's like, why would you possibly let that stand in your way, given all the things you've tried to overcome in the last decade?
No, absolutely, you're right. I don't understand that. That's why they have a hard time shaking the moniker of,
Yes.
of what they are, which is cheap and miserly.
That's exactly right, and that's what's so frustrating about it, is as much as you wanna give them credit for some of the good things they've done, when you see stuff like this, it's hard to, fully buy in that they've turned a corner and are doing things differently. A few other things, the training room got a B+, 6th best in the NFL. Weight room got a B, 16th best. Strength coaches got an A-, 12th best, and ownership got a C, 25th best. Players feel owner Mike Brown is reluctant to invest in facilities was kind of the comment that was left there, which seems pretty on par for what we've just talked about. One other thing on the NFL side of things, Skinny. The NFL, it was reported that they will be implementing automatic first downs done by technology for the upcoming season. Officials will still spot the ball, but then camera technology will tell us whether or not the line to gain was reached. What are your thoughts on that?
I don't know if I like this. I mean, it feels like there's a way to game that a little bit, isn't there? Like when I'm down on the ground, can I reach the ball over, and does that show that the ball went across? Or again, I know it's the officials spotting it, but listen, I think they always know where they're spotting it, right? They know when they come down that first down line where that first down line is. Come on.
I think there have been some instances where we've seen where the chain gang comes out there and it feels pretty inexact, and maybe it feels like they were off. They didn't do it properly, and so at
I
that
love
point,
the drama of that.
if that gets screwed up, then okay, I'm fine with fixing this. Here's the issue. I don't think this solves many of the issues we have with first downs. The issues we have
Right.
with first downs are, where was the ball when the knee went down? And the technology isn't solving that issue. The refs are still in charge of deciding how far you got with the ball. And
Yeah, right. Where was the ball in the tush push sometimes, right?
yeah,
Where was he down? When was he down? How was he down?
and this doesn't solve any of that. It just
Agreed.
makes it faster, so we don't need the chain gang, the 65-year-old fat chain gang members jogging onto the field and
I
jogging
know,
back
but
off. Which I am fine with that.
I don't know, man. I still love the drama of that, of the pulling of the chain. And yeah, I think there's great drama there. I love the drama of it.
But just think about all of us waiting with bated breath, sitting on our hands, looking up at the jumbotron, waiting for it to show us how
Yes.
far you need. We need sixteenth
I
of an inch,
love that. I
but
love
now we'll have
that.
an exact measurement on it, Skinny.
Will we?
We'll
Will
have a
we?
big graphic up on the jumbotron saying it's fourth and a 16th of an inch.
Yeah, will we though? Will we really?
I'm sure we will. You'll love it. All right, let's switch gears here to the Reds. You seem Bengals out right now.
No, I'm good. That was good. That was good stuff.
All right. The Reds are 3-2 through their first 5 games of spring training, and we've had some pretty good storylines already out of Arizona, Skinny. Saturday, you had Ellie De La Cruz go for 2 home runs, one from each side of the plate, including a 450-foot blast off of Tristan McKenzie. And Gavin Lux in his debut went 2 for 3 with 3 RBIs, including a double against the Brewers, which is pretty cool. Then Monday, you had Brady Singer go for 2 innings pitched and 4 Ks in a scoreless debut. Austin Hayes went 3 for 3 with 6 RBIs and 2 homers. And later in that game, you had a kind of a fun moment when Matt and Sean McClain faced off. Sean, obviously the brother of Matt McClain. They each recorded a hit for the respective teams. I also didn't realize they have a third brother, Nick, who was just drafted in the 3rd round by the White Sox in 2024. also from Arizona State. So all three brothers trying to play professional baseball right now in the big leagues. And then Wednesday, you had Ellie De La Cruz hit his third homer of spring training, had an RBI double. Matt McLean with two doubles and a homer in that game. And CES had a game-tying home run in the fourth inning to get going for the spring. That's kind of my takeaways from spring right now is just there's been a lot of fun things going on through the first few days. Has anything else stood out to you in terms of those storylines or anything else?
Listen, you can't. You're with me on this. You take spring training stats with a grain of salt, but it would have been the other way around. If Austin Hayes goes 1 for 22 in spring, we'd all be freaking out, right? So the flip side is what he did gives you excitement of, okay, this guy was an all-star 2 years ago. Maybe it's still in him. He's coming off an injury plagued and a health plagued season last year. And, maybe a healthy Austin Hayes is the all-star caliber player he was from 2 years ago. He at least has flashed that. I mean, Ellie, the right-handed home run he hit to center field did you see the highlight of that?
Yes.
That thing was mashed.
Yes. And honestly, because of what you said, I mean, spring training is pretty much meaningless in terms of the results. I just want cool stuff to look at, whether I'm either tuning in for the game
Yeah.
or I'm just going back to watch the highlights at the end of the day to get caught up on what happened. I just want exactly what we got this last week. Like, oh, two home runs from Ellie today and Gavin Lux played well. Cool. Then the next day you get something cool. Like every day there's been two or three things to look at and go, oh, that's a great highlight. Oh, that's fun. Oh, good. He looks great. I mean, that is what you're looking for in spring training, in my opinion.
Yeah, and Nick Martinez had a nice first outing too.
Yeah, good point. Didn't include that one. I don't really have much else on spring training
Yeah,
because it
no,
is
I'm with you,
spring
but
training.
no, I'm with you. But again, you always take it with a grain of salt. I used to, when I was in fantasy baseball leagues, I'd look at that up and coming guy and go, "Wow, he's mashed 7 home runs in spring. Let me draft him." And then he hits 198 in April. You're like, "Man, you're an idiot. You bought into it." But again, I think we'd also go to the flip side of if Ellie strikes out 13 out of 18 plate appearances. Oh my God, is he regressing? No, he's right on pace to what we think he is. And so yeah, I'm with you on that. That's kind of what I look forward to as well, is just that little highlight here, highlight there of guys that you want to have some positivity towards, and I think it's all that way at the moment. Even CES with the home run, okay, now we get him going. And I think that's a great thing.
Yeah, just give me something
Yeah.
fun to tune into each night and check the box scores until we get to the actual season. And
Yep.
so far, so good on that front. Let's switch gears to college basketball, where it was just a fantastic night of college hoops on Wednesday night before we're recording this. We'll start with Kentucky because they had the game of the night, one of my favorite games of this season.
Great game.
It was absolutely zero defense the final 10 minutes until the very last play of the game when Kentucky won on a double block shot defensively. They lost at Alabama 96-83, then won at Oklahoma on Wednesday night, the game we're talking about, 83-82. They will host Auburn on Saturday in a massive matchup. But Skinny, Otega Owe, we've talked about him a lot this year. This Oklahoma game, him going back to the place where he transferred from, and he's getting booed every time he touches the ball. The crowd is up for him. They're ready to go. I feel like maybe it affected him a little bit early, but man, he got it going, and he made some incredible shots in this game, including the game winner.
Yeah, sometimes fans can be really stupid. I mean, I think he fed off that negativity in the second half because, I mean, he was a man possessed getting to the rim. He got anywhere he wanted to get to in that second half, including the game winning bucket. And I think he fed off of that. I get fans' reaction to that. I mean, I don't know why it's that way in today's portal world, because the guy you love this year is probably not going to be on your team next year, and you're just going to have to start living with that. But I think that helped him defeat. I mean, you saw the chirping at the end of the game, right, in the handshake line, and as they're going off the floor, they almost had a full scale brawl, for goodness sakes. But listen, on that last defensive stand, I mean, as a coach, we lost on a last second layup in a game last week where a kid went coast to coast in 5 seconds, and you're just trying to get him turned one time, right? But you're also fearful of, don't commit a stupid foul, don't commit a silly foul. Well, we didn't commit anything. We let the guy go all the way to the rim, and these guys in this case. Usually it's like, don't leave your feet, don't buy into it. And two guys just leave their feet and say, hell, we're going to try to block your shot. And you're right. To your point, it was a double block shot.
Yeah, I mean, Owe was a big part of from behind, kind of tipped it initially, and then I think Garrison was in front and blocked it again from the other side. But
and
you're
you
right.
run the risk of the from behind of getting called for the foul, even if it's not a foul.
It probably could have been called. I mean, I think he got it pretty cleanly. I wouldn't have called anything. But there was definitely – there are three guys kind of colliding into the guy shooting with seconds left on the clock. It could have been called a foul. One of the other big – by the way, Owe finished with 28 points in this game. And to your point about the like booing a guy when he comes back after he transferred from your school, I mean, I think we got to give the fans some leeway. Like they're getting their hearts ripped out left and
Under
right, losing their.
Understood, but you're helping him feed off of that. Don't help him. Just shut up about it.
That's true. That's true. But I do get the fan sentiment of like, hey, this
Sure.
sucks that this guy
Yeah.
left us and he's with the enemy now. So I'm fine with that. But you're right. I mean, I think it motivated him. But the other storyline for Kentucky was Lamont Butler was back for this game. Skinny Jackson Robinson tried to give it a go and then ended up going back to the bench and sitting out the rest of the game with a warm up on. I thought Lamont Butler looked pretty good. I mean, he wasn't quite back to himself, but he looked good and definitely gave him a boost.
Yeah, and to me right now, I think I'm at the stage of shut Jackson Robinson completely down until the NCAA tournament or until he feels
Yeah.
100%. I think for Butler, he's not 100%, but he still can give you more than what you get from the point guard position. He got in some foul trouble last night, limited minutes because of that, probably limited minutes because of just coming back from the injury. But I Jackson Robinson, we thought was the most important player, right? I've always thought it was Butler, and I still think it is Butler. And again, I'm not here to diss Jackson Robinson. I think a healthy Jackson Robinson makes this a better team, and I want a healthy Jackson Robinson if I'm a Kentucky fan in the NCAA tournament. And I think that's where I'm at with that. If I get he tried to give it a go, and you wanted him, I think they realized how big that game was. That was kind of like the final nail of a quad one win that you felt like you solidified a 4 seed at worst. And now, if you can beat Auburn, you solidify a 3 seed and then don't suffer an awful loss to LSU. And then whatever happens in the Missouri game happens. I mean, they're now 9-8 in quad ones. I think that one to me was one that they felt like they had to get that one because Auburn's not guaranteed, even though it's at home, because Auburn's just stupid, stinking good. I think this one makes that even a fun game because now you're playing with a little bit of house money. I think they realize how important this game was for a lot of ways, and that's why I think they probably Jackson forced his way back or wasn't quite ready, but they thought whatever 80% of Jackson might give us some help. So I get that, but to me that win was just huge. That solidified, in my opinion. You can disagree with it. A 4 seed at worst, and maybe even solidified a 3 seed.
Yeah, I mean they're the third 3 seed right now according to Bracket Matrix, I believe, and
Yeah,
I
yeah,
think they're very likely to end up as a 3 seed would be
yeah,
my take on that. Skinny, one other thing that I kind of thought's funny about this current UK team is we've now had two different coaches at UK the last 2 seasons with two absolutely opposite teams. I mean, no similar players on there at all, and back-to-back years UK cannot stop straight line drives to save their
yeah.
lives.
Not
I
at
mean,
all.
it's so weird to watch the ball just go straight to the rim on every defensive possession in the second half like they did last night.
And the weird part to me is you had depth on both teams and you had fouls to play with. And just listen, officials aren't going to call a foul all the time. I'm a big mantra of dribblers don't go where dribblers don't want to go, and I don't care if you have to foul. I won't get mad at you fouling a guy driving. I'd prefer you play with your chest. I prefer you chest up, and more times than not you do. But I'm just telling you, human nature of officials is they're not calling it all the time. They're going to blow it some, and as long as they're doing it both ways, I'm good with that. But if I've got 50 fouls to play with, I'm damn well going to have my guys use a bunch of them.
It's almost like with the Pope system, he doesn't the defense slows them down too much. If they spend too much time defending, it's like they can't play the way they want to
Right.
offensively and get it moving quick enough. They
Just
they'd
get on
rather
that. Let's go.
run with them.
We'll,
Yeah.
we'll trade 3 for 2. Get it out of that and go get us a 3.
It really feels like that sometimes. All right, let's switch gears to Cincinnati. Beat TCU 75-63 and Baylor 69-67. They play at Houston on Saturday. And I mean, they were dead in the water a week ago. They still might be dead in the water, Skinny, but they're kind of doing the same thing for UC fans that Xavier's been doing for Xavier fans, just keeping the hope flickering a little bit. Josh Reed, I thought was the big story of the
Great.
Baylor game. Had 11 points and 4 rebounds in 33 minutes for Cincinnati. A guy that they really weren't using much at all a month or so ago has now become a kind of a big focal point of their team. I didn't expect this out of Josh Reed.
Well, I'm going to give Wes Miller credit for this. I still don't know if he's the right guy for the job or if he's ever going to get it done. But the little tweaks he made in season here late to put Day in the starting lineup, to take Dan Skillings out, to put Josh Reed in. Maybe it was out of desperation. But
Yeah,
good for him.
certainly.
Good for him for at least swallowing hard and saying, I got to do something different. I can't just keep rolling the same guys out there and hoping for a different result. Some of it is the schedule's gotten softer, not in a major soft way, but it's gotten somewhat softer where you've had some winnable games at home. And the Baylor game was kind of a 50-50. I think UC was a 2.5 point favorite, so they were favored to win, and they won basically on the line itself. But again, I'll give Wes credit for at least doing that, of not continuing to say, all right, got to roll my same guys out. Hopefully do something. No, it wasn't working, so he made a change. Again, maybe it was out of desperation. Maybe maybe Reed was just giving him a lot of good practice minutes to the players. Like, damn it, you know what? I am going to play out because you've earned your way in. And once he's been in, he's been fine. He was really clutch the other night for them. Back to the NCAA tournament thing, though, I don't even know if a win at Houston does enough, Rick. I mean, it gives them a huge quad one. I mean, that's like a mega quad one win, but it would only be two. And they're right now they're 1-9 in quad ones. I'm sorry, that's just, even if they win out, that's just not enough.
Well, Skinny, that's the same exact boat Xavier's in.
I know,
They got one quad one win, and they don't have another opportunity at one.
Here's my question for you, because in bracket matrix, and I know you don't look at them, but I look at the two major mainstream ones. I look at bracketology and Jerry Palm's. I think Jerry Palm actually has Xavier as one of the is in one of the first four games at Dayton. Joe Lenardi has him in the group of first four out. Bracket Matrix has them, I think, fourth or fifth in that next group of out. And UC's nowhere to be found in any of that. So my question for you is, how is Xavier's resume better than UC's?
Look, I don't even care to go into it because we're literally talking about a bunch of teams that suck.
Well,
right
I
now
know, but I'm just curious why that would be.
I don't know. I would have to go into the nitty gritty.
Yeah.
Like every team, if you look at them on the bubble right now,
Right.
it's terrible. Like we're literally talking about terrible resumes and teams that shouldn't be in the NCAA tournament. So I have no interest in. Like I keep hearing people going like, "Why is Wake Forest still in the field?" Because everyone else sucks too. That's why I don't know. They're looking at something else than you are. Your one quad win that you're looking at for that team, they're looking at that team's net number or their wins above bubble or something else. So it's like we're all just finding one stupid stat to cling to that says this team is slightly better than that team, even though they both suck.
And I go back to this, and I know you agree with this. You don't want to just be hovering around the bubble because all it takes is one or two bid stealers and the bubbles pop. So either I think you're firmly in at this point or you're out.
Well, I mean, we're past that point for both the local teams.
No, that's right.
They are playing the game of they have to hope for no bid thieves. They have to hope to win out. They need everything to go their way. Both of them do down the stretch. And it's fortunately for those fan bases, they're doing what they need to do right now to keep that hope alive and keep this thing somewhat interesting over the final few weeks. Which I mean, that's what I'm curious about, Skinny. I was going to save it for asking about the Xavier game, but are you enjoying this? Every game is do or die scenario for both Xavier and UC down the stretch, because I was almost checked out a month ago. And I will say the last few weeks, I've kind of been interested in how each of these games are going to go for those teams.
Yeah, I know. I mean, if you're a member of each of the fan bases, you'd much prefer your team being playing these games for seed lines rather than for their lives. But it has made it interesting. I mean, I don't think they go to Houston. I don't even know if I give them a puncher's chance at Houston, but it makes the Houston game extraordinarily interesting because then you go, well, I think I'm right on this. I don't have it in front of me, Rick. I was doing it right before the podcast. I believe if they win out, which would include the Houston win, I think they'd finish 10-10 in the Big 12. And overall, 10-10 in the Big 12, pretty good.
Yeah, I mean, we're going to have teams from high major conferences with losing records this year. So, yeah, going 500 in major conferences doesn't preclude you from making the NCAA tournament at all. Skinny, here's the other thing I was interested. Back to the Josh Reed conversation. With Josh Reed emerging for Cincinnati, we've now had something like that happen for all three local teams. You have Dan Goretzka at NKU, who was supposed to start at the beginning of the season, was relegated to the bench, didn't even play at all in a game back in January, and then reemerged and is now like the team's best player. You have Dante Maddox at Xavier, who wasn't getting off the bench for a period there after the new year and wasn't. They were criticizing him a lot about his inability to take care of the basketball and play defense and all these things. Now all of a sudden he's flat out won some games for Xavier and has become a really important part of what they're doing. Kind of the same thing for Josh Reed all of a sudden. Is this a new byproduct of the transfer portal, do you think? Are we going to see this each year where guys come in, they just don't understand your system, or they're just not ready to get implemented for whatever reason? But after, that you get half a year through it, all of a sudden it starts to click for them and they start being a real productive member of your team?
Yeah, I mean, when you're evaluating players, I mean, the summer's the time to start the evaluation process of where they can fit in, because once you start getting to games, right, you might have a week gap on occasion between games that you can work on yourselves, but usually it's game prep for the next game. And so you don't get a chance to continue to have that player evolve. And again, sometimes just out of sheer desperation, it's, all right, I got to put this guy in because the other guys aren't doing anything. And then it's up to that player. Maybe at that point, then he's in a comfort zone of getting in the flow and understanding the system, to your point, and understanding what the role is, or just understanding that, you know what, if I'm a guy who's open, yeah, I don't need to pass up a shot. I'm going to go take this shot. And so I do think it is a product of that. I think it's a product, again, of the evaluation leading up to a season of if you haven't shown you have the grasp of things, it's hard to get trusted to play minutes. Once you get into game mode, it's play a game, whatever the next day, take a day off, get a shooting day in, get a prep day in, and here we go. We got another game. I mean, it's just the cycle of it goes so fast that you don't have a real good chance to continue the evolution of a player.
All right, let's switch gears to Xavier. They beat Seton Hall on Sunday, 73-66. They'll host Creighton on Saturday. The Seton Hall win wasn't impressive, Skitty. They didn't play very well in that game. They had a big lead. They let Seton Hall come back into it. It was down to 3 at one point. Then they were able to finish it off and pull away. But I guess because they've won 4 in a row now, do you feel like they've turned the corner, or do they need to win this Creighton game now for you to say, yeah, they're playing better basketball than they were a month ago?
No, I think you have to win the Creighton game. It's a winnable game. I mean, Creighton's good, but it's a winnable game. I think that also continues the forward momentum going. It puts you again. I think they're at worst a 5 seed in the Big East tournament at the moment, and maybe a chance because I think UConn still has 2. I know they got Marquette left. I can't remember who they got one other tough game on the road, I think. Play your way up to the 4 seed line. It probably doesn't matter. The 4 or 5 are going to play each other anyway, so that part doesn't matter to me. But yeah. I mean, it just solidifies forward momentum, and the fact that again you're not beating the. I mean, the dregs of this league are really dregs of a league. This is the bottom part of this league this year is just really, really bad. I think you'd agree with that. And so yeah, you need to win those games. It's certainly better than losing those, but I don't know if it proves if you're any good or not. Creighton's good, and so go beat them and prove that you're good.
It feels like there is a real cutoff line in the league this year from sort of the top half teams and the bottom half teams. And that's why when you look at what Xavier's done, it's like, yeah, it's great that they've played consistently well for 4 straight games. But each of those games, it's like, well, they're better than Providence, especially Providence that's decimated by the injuries that they are right now. Butler is clearly a good matchup for them. Seton Hall stinks. So what have you done over the last 4 games? I mean, it's good. It's better than the alternative of losing one of those and not playing consistently well. But you really do have to prove you can beat some of the better teams in your conference. And this is your last opportunity to do that here against Creighton.
I just would hate if I'm a Xavier fan or a player or Sean Miller that if you don't get in, you go back and go, what if at UConn? What if at Marquette? What if at Villanova? Even though Villanova clearly what if at UC? Yeah, I mean, those are 4 clear. I mean, the what if at Villanova is more the what if of not taking advantage of the opportunity. They didn't play very well. So the other games they were clearly in to the end.
At St. John's, you're up by 16 in the second half for a massive quad-1 win in conference, and you lose that game in overtime. I mean, see, Mo asked me that yesterday of like, what will be the biggest what if for the Xavier team if they don't make it? And I said, the entire season is a what if. It's filled with what if. There's like 4 or 5 games where they gave away late leads that they could have very easily won. You flip any of them, and it likely puts them on the right side of the bubble. If you flip 2 of them, they're clearly in and already. So yeah, it's going to be tough for Xavier fans to swallow. And I think there is a way, to your point a few minutes ago, where they win out and you still get to the Selection Sunday. You're looking at 1 quad-1 win, and the committee says, sorry, that's not enough.
It's not enough, right?
All right, NKU won at Wright State 80-76 and then beat IU Indy at home 71-67 over the weekend. They play at Fort Wayne Thursday night tonight as we're recording this, and then host Youngstown State on Saturday afternoon for Senior Day. Final regular season game of the year already, if you can believe that, Skinny.
Crazy.
Are you starting to drink the golden Kool-Aid coming out of Highland Heights? Is it just the same as it is every year? The calendar flips to February and the North start winning games.
No, not quite. I need to see the matchup come conference tournament time. There's a couple of matchups they just don't seem to match up.
Well, they're likely going to get Detroit. It's over a 60% chance that they get Detroit at home in the first round.
Yeah, no. I'm just talking as it evolves. I mean, at what point would you maybe face Milwaukee, or do you get lucky where the bracket busts and you don't have to play Milwaukee? Morris, do you get fortunate the bracket busts and you don't play Robert Morris?
Cleveland State, it could be a likely matchup, and I think they've already proven they can beat that Cleveland State team. So if that, like, a lot of people look at it and say Cleveland State's been the best team in the conference for a lot of the year, but I think matchup wise, if you look at it and you say it's Detroit and then Cleveland State, if that ended up being the path, you'd be okay with that.
Yeah, and I mean, listen, the 1-bid leagues are just they're the most fun for me. I know it's probably not fun for the coaches or the players because it's literally, it comes down your whole season, all the things you've done from the summer through the early part to the conference stuff. None of it freaking matters. It's literally what do you do in 3 games in March.
Well, it's not fun if you're the best team in the league. It is fun when you're in NKU's position this year, when you can still save the entire season by just turning it on late. And that's what I think the players understand. At least the players, like you see it in Trey Robinson and Sam Vincent the last few games. It's like they've flipped a switch. They're back to playing who they've been in previous years and playing really good defense, trapping the ball in corners and forcing turnovers like they always do in their matchup zone. And something looks different about this team. They've won 5 of their last 7. To your point, I still think there are a couple of concerning matchups if you match up with Milwaukee or Robert Morris because of their rebounding ability. But aside from that, I think one thing that's helped this year is in this conference, because of the transfer portal rating the top players out of it every year, there just aren't the stars this year. And so the
Right.
teams at the top, they don't feel like they're heads and shoulders above anyone. So on any given night, I think you really feel like you have a chance, especially if you're a team like NKU that's sitting with a Trey Robinson, a Sam Vincent, and now a Dan Goretzka, who's skinny. I don't know how much you saw of the last few games, but I'm to the point now where I think Dan Goretzka is the most athletic perimeter player in the conference.
Yeah, I did not see, but I listened to you and Jim on a couple of those, and I think you literally made that point during coming out of a timeout or all after, because I turned it on and you were just talking about him and the way he's played. And I think even Jim, the surprise in his voice of how he's played of late was pretty interesting.
Well, there was a moment in the game where they're down by 4 against Wright State, and it's like it happened right in front of us because Darren Horn standing in front of Jim and I, he turns to the bench to Simon McCormick, who's their offensive coordinator, so to speak, as an assistant coach. And Simon basically gave him a signal for a play. Darren called it, and all it was basically clearing out the left side of the floor. Trey Robinson is in the corner in case you need to kick to him, and Dan Goretzka went right by the defender in the blink of an eye and scored a layup to make it a 2-point or a one point game. I think they were down by 3 right there. That was just like, it was amazing how easy it was in a critical moment like that to just hand the ball to a player and go get you a layup. So
And it feels like it doesn't feel like it's happening. It's every March, right? It's sometimes that one guy when you need a bucket goes and gets it and carries a team for whatever period of time it takes place. And sometimes that guy's out of the blue. Sometimes it's a star guy. Maybe it's this guy.
yeah, and I mean, he's got that type of ability because of athleticism, because he's a ball handler, and he's hitting these step back threes. He's shooting well from deep. He's got that type of go-to scoring factor where he could carry you down the stretch if needed.
Well, I'll go back to Otega Owe. There's been times this year I thought he could do the things he did in that Oklahoma game, or literally just take it over. They can't guard you off the bounce, dude. Just go do it. And there was times it was like down at Vandy a couple times he deferred and then he turned it over on a dribble. It's like that can't happen. That shouldn't happen. But he's a guy that you look at and go, he could carry them at times in March in a big way.
Yeah, and he definitely showed that the other night. So, all right, let's switch gears here. Ask Skinny anything. We'll wrap this one up. This came, I think it was on Lance McAllister's show earlier this week. Someone had asked him about Skinny's Mount Rushmore of Reds baseball, or he played a clip of someone answering that question. Then he had a conversation about it. So we were driving, and Jim Kelch and I were talking about it, and he said, "Why don't you ask Skinny who his Mount Rushmore of Reds baseball would be? Who do you got?"
Well, Pete, Johnny, and Joe would be up there. And I'd probably go Frank Robinson. Frank Robinson has to be up there. I'm just trying to figure out who I'd eliminate. I'll go Pete, Johnny, Joe, Morgan, and Frank Robinson.
Yeah, I think that the other conversations you get into there would be Barry Larkin. Some people might want to put Joey Votto there. I think he's clearly beyond those 4 that you mentioned. Who else might be in that conversation in terms of in that 4th spot? I don't think there are many options.
Yeah, I mean, by the time they got Tom Seaver, arguably one of the great pitchers in baseball history, Tom had good years with the Reds, but his bulk of his career was done with the Mets, and so he's not on there. I mean, he's clearly, again, he's a Hall of Famer for a reason. He's a terrific pitcher.
We had trouble with pitching candidates. I like Rio. We threw out there.
I know, like Jim Maloney. Yeah. I'm not sure I can put even one of those close. I mean, Barry Larkin's certainly in the conversation. I mean, he's a Hall of Famer for a reason.
He's probably the best argument to get in there.
But here's what we're talking about, right? We're talking about the following: the all-time hits leader,
best catcher ever,
and arguably the best offensive second baseman ever. And Frank Robinson was clearly a great player in Cincinnati, and it probably would have. I mean, the year after he got traded to Baltimore, he won a Triple Crown with the Orioles.
That's the only thing with Frank is, do you make the argument that his best years were with the Orioles, and so that someone else could cut him off?
He had some pretty good years with the Reds too. I mean,
no doubt. I'm wondering if that was the argument.
He and Vada Pinson carried the offense in 1961 to the. I mean, the pitching staff was great that year. That probably carried the day to the 61 pennant. But Frank had really not a lot of help around him. It was just him and Vada Pinson in the middle of that lineup, and that was kind of it. Jerry Lynch had a big year hitting home runs off the bench, but again, it's a tough one. I mean, could I find a way to chisel a fifth face on there, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of people would want to add a fifth or a sixth there when you start talking about the Reds. The Reds have a pretty good Mount Rushmore of baseball. They've
I
got some
agree.
great
Yeah.
names.
I mean, like we're talking about all-time hits leader, greatest catcher ever, arguably the greatest offensive second baseman ever. That's pretty good.
Pretty cool. Yeah, the one area where they lack is the pitching names.
Yep.
If you could only do one of the following, cover the Bengals, coach basketball, or golf, money is of no consequence. You don't have to think about that. But you can only do one. What would you choose?
So, coach basketball or play golf?
Play golf, coach basketball, or cover the Bengals, which I can't imagine any way, form, or fashion you're going to choose to work for free.
I wish I had a red. This is just a pen. If I had a red marker, I'd take the cover Bengals, and that would be cut pretty quick. It'd be coach basketball. We lost our district tournament game last night, and we all got to say our piece in the locker room, and I meant it. And I tried not. I don't cry easily, but I started to choke up a little bit. Where I'm like, the thing I'm gonna miss the most is being in the gym with this group of guys, because it was just a great group of kids. I mean, every day in the gym was a lot of fun. Got a lot done. It was a good group. We suffered a horrific injury late in the year to our best player who couldn't play, and so we play the what if game of what if he was healthy. Can't do it. And high school sports is just so fluid that you don't get that group ever again, and just the finality of that. So yeah, coaching basketball to me, I occasionally, like we all do, I'm dragging ass going into practice a certain day, and some days you're like, let's just get practice over with. I didn't have very many of those this year, man. I enjoyed every minute of it, so I'd go coach basketball.
Have you ever golfed with Dan Horde? And who is
Yes.
the better golfer?
Oh, Dan is. Dan hits it. Dan hits it. When Dan hits it well. Dan hits it pretty damn well. So yes, I have played with Dan Horde.
And then the final question is Skinny's top 3 music groups.
Well, I'm a big Rolling Stones fan. I think I've mentioned that. Again, you're talking age. So how about this though, Rick? I will tell you this. So I rented a car to drive to Indy, just so I didn't put wear and tear on my car. So I rented a car to drive to Indy, and it had XM radio. I don't have XM radio in my car.
Nice.
And I found myself gravitating between the hip hop and R&B stations and the dance music stations. Every time I'd go to the rock station, Classic Rewind would be a rock song I didn't like. I kept gravitating back to the dance station.
Like, Shade 4-5.
Yeah, no, dude, it's great. Yeah, it was on there. Shade 4-5's on there for sure. So this is going to sound odd because I'm going back to some rock. I am a big. You won't. Most people won't like this, but this is back in my genre. I'm a huge Cars fan. I think I have every Cars album / cassette / DVD they ever made.
All right,
so
Rolling Stones,
Cars, man. I know people are going to be shocked by this because I grew up in this era, and I think I have friends that shun me on this one. My wife hates me for this. I'm not a big Beatles fan. I'm not. I mean,
not only did you not call out the Beatles on this list, you went out of your way to say I'm not a Beatles guy.
Yeah, I'm not a big Beatles guy. I'm trying to think who else.
People are going to be upset about that.
I'll go this one because their guitar riffs were outstanding, and I could listen to "Just Got Paid" like on a loop if I could. ZZ Top. ZZ Top was sneaky good, man. Sneaky good.
That's a pretty good 3. I think the Cars one will throw people off a little bit.
Yeah, it will. It will. But I just, for whatever reason, I like their music.
All right, that's all we got.
All right, good stuff. Appreciate it, Rick. And enjoy the road trip that you're currently on. Have a safe trip back. Have a good call tonight. When you do this game on Thursday night, NKU, we'll talk a lot more college basketball next week as we inch closer and closer to Selection Sunday and Conference Tournament Week, which could be really big. Will be really big for the local teams. For Rick Broering, I'm Richard Skinner. Thanks for watching and listening to the Skinny Podcast, as always, presented by Blake the Attorney Maislin.